Broadcasting from the campus of Salisbury University, this is WSDL Ocean City, NPR News Talk 90.7, putting Delmarva first. It's time for Delmarva Today with your host, Don Rush.
Downtown revitalization. It's a term that has bounced around City Hall in Salisbury for literally decades. Welcome to Delmarva Today. This is Don Rush. For most Salisbury residents who have chronically watched their city council members on PAC 14, every few years there are new plans. Some call for streetscaping, others debate the opening and closing of the plaza, and there's the perennial favorite, sell some of the city-owned parking lots. But City Council President Jake Day says there's more activity in downtown today than the city has seen in more than half a century. He says there are more restaurants, more real estate activity, and even the opening of the first retail stores in decades. But downtown often seems as if it's sliced up into independent sections with its wide parking lots and uneven streets. And walkability could be a key to bringing back this once thriving area. City of Salisbury held a walkability workshop this week to puzzle out this question, and one of the speakers was Dan Burton. He is executive director, the co-founder of the nonprofit Walkable and Livable Communities Institute. And according to his bio, he spent the last 35 years helping the world get back on its feet. And he joins us in our studios this morning. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Don. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, let me first ask you, what is your definition of walkability? How do you define that in terms of how cities are planned or revitalized?
Yeah. Well, walkability is a term that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. It was never in the American lexicon. It was created because we made our communities non-walkable. Throughout all of human history, everything we've ever designed was to get the right scale, the right pattern, the right ingredients for people to walk. It's how people have always lived.
All right, get around.
Yeah, and then starting somewhere in the 1920s, the philosophy changed, a architectural feature called modernism that started to stress the automobile, and that the automobile was going to be the savior of cities. Well, instead, it emptied them out and made it economically non-sustainable, created the sprawl patterns we see. And a lot of the unsustainable ways of trying to manage a city you can't manage. So walkability is a big part of the solution to get back to that historic, time-honored way of designing cities around people. Accommodate the car, but design the cities for people.
So how do you make that change, particularly with cities that are designed or have been a result of the automobile? As a matter of fact, I grew up in Los Angeles, which is an area in where really the automobile is how you get from one place to another. And if there are little downtowns, they are little small downtowns that you drive to. Yeah. You don't necessarily live near. How do you go from something like that, or at least in terms of suburbs, to getting some kind of walkability?
With difficulty. and seriously, all of our institutions, from banking to real estate to the incentives for how to do development, is still geared toward the past. And so we're in this period of transition where to go forward, we're going to have to change everything. And the world will look better. And what you're describing as a more vibrant downtown is just an indication that we're starting to think about the right things. We're not there yet, and that's what this walkability workshop is really going to do. Try to bring together enough people that we can get a solid consensus going, get some collaboration, get people to speak the same language, not be afraid of the future. Perhaps be more afraid of the past, because it's not served us well. And here's the interesting thing, is that 60% of the housing, the buildings, the shops, the everything that are needed in 2050 have not been built. So we're going to build ourselves out of this, but it's got to require a different pattern and a different way of looking at how we build walkable, livable, healthy towns again.
Well, one of the things here in Salisbury, which is sort of interesting, is that in the downtown area that you see now, back particularly where some of the parking lots are now, there used to be buildings with stores. And if you see some of the older photographs, you can see people walking around, big stores, that kind of thing. Obviously, there's been a lot of clearing out in terms of the parking lots, clearing out some of those buildings. And at the same time, you've had the development to the north end of this city of gigantic big box stores, retail stores. And so that when people, say, in the city of Salisbury want to, say, go and buy something,
Yes.
they're going to go north to these big stores rather than necessarily go to downtown. How do you resolve that issue? And that's how this situation, I think, in part grew, because a lot of the north end sort of drained the business out so that we didn't have the kind of attraction that you used to have in that downtown area.
Yeah, and what we're talking about is transitional. It will take 20, probably even more years, but we're starting to see the seeds of downtowns coming back alive. And here's a really important point. For any town to succeed, it needs to hold on to more of its money and not send it off to Chicago or Tokyo. The big boxers are owned by very big corporate interests. And so they'll take all but about, I think it's 12% they'll leave behind. The rest of the money just disappears. A ma and pa shop, totally different. About 60% of the money stays in the local banks, the local dentist, the local everything, and recirculates and therefore drives the local economy. So as we revitalize our downtowns, make the streets healthy and inviting and exciting, connect well into the neighborhoods with trails and sidewalks, everything, then we're giving a retailer a fair chance to succeed. So those who are coming in now are the early pioneers, but that's what the demographics say everybody truly wants. The elders want to age in place. They want to stay here. They don't want to go somewhere else. They want their grandchildren here, but there aren't enough draws for their children to get good jobs seated and going. So the greatest news is that the millennial generation, the youngest, they don't want the suburbs. They don't want the old strips. They want to come back to real places where they have a choice in transportation. They can drive, but they can also walk or bike. And that's what's going to be the fuel that's going to get Salisbury really moving. And also important to understand, the cities that pick this up first win. The ones that can't get their act together, they're going to lose. They're going to lose more jobs. They're going to lose more opportunity. So I hate to say it's all about the built environment, because it's not just that, but the built environment has to come first. The streets, the trees, the place making, and that's what this workshop is going to be all about.
Because one of the things you talk about, you used to think that two things. One is that you should have higher densities near the town center, and then where it's appropriate to obviously have more density further out. How do you get that to happen? Because when I look at, for instance, our downtown, I mean, there are the neighborhoods that are nearby, but then as you begin to move out, and you've got a number of developments as you move out towards the outer portions of the city, those are further away. How do you increase density? I mean, or is that a way to increase it at all? Because I mean, the buildings are already there.
Sure. Well, I think the key is you start with the central city, and that, if you don't really get that going, you don't have the funds to go out and start to rescue other places. Then you go to the locations that are mostly big box or strips right now, and you identify those good locations where you can get a true village going. And what that means is that the buildings are set back, that don't relate to the street. New buildings come in. You don't necessarily take the old buildings out, but new buildings come in. They're called liner buildings, and those are mixed use. And you're already starting to do a few of those. I've noted that, certainly in the north end more than the south end. But it's happening, and it's happening close to the university campus first. You know, you're seeing new buildings being built that are honoring the street rather than, doing the wrong thing for the street. So as the code of what is acceptable in the community changes, you're actually changing the incentives. So the next developer comes in. If you level the playing field by making the code to where all developers must do the correct thing, then every developer wins. But as long as it's just the bold or the pioneering developer that comes in, they're not going to compete well. So it has to come with good governance too.
Now, you talk about being within, say, I think it's, say, to be best within something like an eighth of a mile, I guess it is, of, say, the downtown areas. And you've got an eighth and a quarter and a half and so on. Explain a little bit about that. Well, let's first of all, explain a little bit about that concept first.
Yeah. The whole concept is if people are to walk, if that's to be a choice, then it's got to be a range that you can do it faster, easier, better by foot than you can getting in a car and hunting down a new parking space. A quarter mile is what we call the walk shed. That's the magic. Anything within a quarter mile of the heart of the community, people are going to walk in first choice. You can go then half a mile out. This is on a radius. You can go out half a mile, and it's only a 10-minute walk. And as long as it's beautiful, attractive, you don't have any ugly roads you have to navigate, that works beautifully. And a huge percentage of people will walk a 10-minute walk. And then you can go out 1 mile, and again, it's on the radius, and that's only a 20-minute walk. So if you make the connections in beautiful, charming, people will walk a mile easily. So it's all based on a quarter mile gives you the best density and place to put your density and the heart of all the things. Half a mile works, but even a mile, you'll see an increase in the value of everybody's home as long as you start to work on the streets and make them attractive and fun and functional so that you have a choice, that you don't just get in your car to get across the street.
I can imagine me getting in my car, even if I guess maybe a mile away, I don't know. But one of the things that's really interesting, particularly about this place, and a lot of listeners have heard this before, is that we obviously have a mall, an enclosed mall. And if you take a map of that mall and you place over the downtown area, you can see that mall is actually much, much bigger in space and area and walking wise than, say, the downtown area. So then the question becomes, so why would somebody want to go to the mall and walk all those distances as opposed to, say, a downtown? My answer, at least from a gut standpoint, is, well, because the interior is designed that they want to stay there, that there are places to go, it's attractive, they've designed it so that you want to actually be there. So you may walk much longer distances, say, at that mall than you would in downtown, but it's much more enjoyable. It doesn't even seem as much like as much effort. How do you take an area like downtown that we have, which seems, as I indicated in the opening of the program, that's kind of sliced up in all these roads, and we'll get to Route 50 in a moment. How do you make that as attractive as, say, just going to the mall?
Think about how the malls were created. The malls were created to become the attractive place for shopping. And as they did it, they followed all the great rules of town making. They put terminating vistas at each end. You knew that if you walk this way, you'll get to Sears, or this one at one time, J.C. Penney's now, someone else. It was a controlled environment. The shop owners obeyed by the rules. You're going to open by this hour, and you're not going to close early. You're not going to go off and play golf in the middle of the day. So they became predictable. So everything that people want in a downtown was copied in the malls. But as they became successful, they drained the life out of the downtowns. And therefore, the assuredness and the quality started to fall off. And then it's a hit or miss as to whether or not you get the real payout of going to a downtown. Now, that's what's starting to reverse itself. We're seeing many mall businesses, that is, the corporations that run them, saying they're never going to build another one. And instead, even Walmart is now saying they built the last other big boxers, that they now want to come back to where people want to shop, which is downtown. Now, they wouldn't be able to come in at the scale they've been out in the burbs, but they can be very successful as long as they're the right size, the right scale. We see Target doing it first. I think Walmart's coming in a little later, but Target's got some beautiful stores in the downtowns of places like Stanford, Connecticut, and quite a number of other locations. So we're going to see that stores will be more appropriately scaled so that they don't form what we call a super block. When you make your buildings too big, they destroy the fabric of a community. So we're going to see some real desire, some real competition for all the stores, including the corporate run stores, want to be in downtowns.
Do you think you need some kind of anchor? I know when I was talking to the mayor of Berlin just about 4 weeks ago or so, and they got named as the coolest small town in America. But I asked him about how they revitalized their downtown, because at one point, as he told me, he says there were probably more stores that were closed than were open, and they all got together and said, well, what are we going to do? And one of the keys the mayor said was we needed an anchor. In their particular case, it was an old hotel where they kind of exposed it back out to the street, and it began to generate some activity. Do you need an anchor or two anchors for a downtown area to come back, you think?
You do. You need a real sign that the town is turning around, the downtown's turning around. And I worked in many small towns. Greenville, South Carolina is one I'm thinking of, where they brought back a 5-star hotel. That's a real indicator that people are ready to make the investments. With one good investor, others follow. And it can be a chain store, it could be a national brand, but it can also be a real commitment by a number of investors, developers in the community, restoring an old hotel, giving it a brand new, fresh name. And that's the sign people are waiting for. They want to see that they're not going to be out there alone. And so you can see almost to the town, those that have turned around have made that investment, gotten a sharp business person to know how to run a good business, to come back to a downtown and then start that spark. And after a while, it spreads like wildfire.
How important are tax incentives to all of this? Because a number of years ago, I remember reading about tax abatement programs and so on, and there were a lot of cities that went that way, and they didn't really get much for their money. I mean, they either lost money and the revitalization didn't occur. Whereas there were other cities in the same era where they didn't give tax abatements and they had great downtowns. And one of the keys was the infrastructure and the labor force, a lot of other things to bring employers in. How important do you think it is for tax incentives as opposed to, and obviously you have to be very careful about not giving away the store, as it were?
Yeah. Finance is not my background, but I
what have you
pay
seen
a lot of attention that the incentives to continue to go out and put in the next store in the strip are much stronger than they are to come back downtown. So what is needed downtown is any set of incentives that make it the natural choice. So just as an example, if the town code currently calls for so much parking for a store of a given size in the downtown, first thing you do is you get rid of any parking requirements. There are no requirements downtown. It's a parking free zone in the sense that you don't have to provide any. You can figure out what the market is and provide some, but don't destroy the downtown by forcing a suburban standard on your downtown. And that's what most towns have done. And you may still be there. You may have already said, no, we're not going to force parking downtown. We're going to let it naturally work itself out. Then there are so many other incentives, but the big thing is you can't try to incentivize one thing like the downtown if you're pushing all the incentives out to the suburbs. And so that's what's got to stop. Every person who looks at how to succeed with a banker, with other investors and so on, looks at those models that have worked up until now, and all the incentives are drawn for sprawl. What we now need is a whole bunch of incentives, and they can be tax incentives, but they can be any of other incentives to come back downtown and to make those investments and to win and to know that you'll win and convince bankers. And sometimes it's just getting one good banker to realize that they should be giving loans out for entrepreneurs, write a good business plan, that are going to make it. We worked recently in a little town in Arkansas called Batesville, and the people who brought me in were the bankers. They got it. They understood. So they collected their money, said, let's bring this guy in. Let's transform our Main Street. They did. And they're really starting to pick up energy. Didn't require any government money. It just required somebody to say, we're tired of writing all our loans for suburban businesses. We want to write loans for downtown.
In terms of parking, what kind of relationship should there be to parking? I mean, some of the parking lots, as a matter of fact, were created because they felt there wasn't enough parking for the buildings that were there, and of course they tore down some other buildings and so on. How do you do that? Because right now we have sort of these big swaths of parking lots that and one of the things that about the parking lots is that they really do separate out individual buildings and facilities. For instance, if you go from say downtown and you go through a building and you come out and you see a gigantic parking lot, and then way off to the side you can see a couple of restaurants. Now it looks like and I got to tell you, from that perspective, it looks like a long walk, as it were, because you got to go to the parking. What kind of relationship in terms of space do you think is required?
The big problem of almost any downtown is we've had really bad parking policies. The problem I found in almost every town I've been to is there is no parking problem. There is a parking management problem. Shop owners that park right in front of their own store. No way to manage the parking, and I haven't had the chance to study your setting yet, but giving away free parking is the worst thing you can do. And where shop owners say, no, if we charge for parking, we're not going to be able to make it. What the customer wants is assurance that if they pull into a parking space, it's going to be there. They don't mind paying a quarter or 50 cents or even more if they have that assurance. And again, it's far more convenient than parking in some remote parking place in the mall.
Right.
Downtowns have the natural fabric to win if we just stop punishing the customer that wants to come there. And you're right, you've got to get rid of a lot of these eyesore parking lots. They're a real blemish on what is a great classic historic town pattern.
Now, here in Salisbury, one of the things that happened was that they wanted to have this sort of bypass Route 50, and it cuts right through the center of town. Now, one of the ideas, by the way, behind this was that they do have a turnoff for Salisbury's downtown. However, very few cars actually use it. They're just like speeding down the highway to Ocean City. It's not enough for them to get off the road and say, "Oh, we're going to stop." And that road, by the way, cut off the other houses, the suburbs were the housing tracts on the other side, because it used to be you'd be able to walk to the downtown area. Now you've got to cross this gigantic busy street. And you've got a number of sections that are sort of like that, and that chops up, as it were, downtown. How do you remake downtown when you have those kinds of what seem to be permanent fixtures that you've got to work around?
The idea of doing a bypass and getting the traffic out of the actual downtown would have been a good idea if it had been done right, but it was done by engineers who had one performance measure on their mind, and that is how fast can they move the traffic. So they designed the roads where motors go so fast that they don't even notice there's a downtown in the town. And so the first big step is to redesign Route 50 to be a true boulevard, to be a street where as you approach the downtown, the speeds become less and less until when you're in the core of where you would turn into downtown, the speeds may be no higher than 20. That calls for new tools, different ways to design intersections, lots of trees, beauty, charm. You start with some liner buildings a ways out, so and the liner buildings bringing the buildings to the street edge, as you do in a classic downtown, and really start to have the road read that you're only supposed to go this speed. It's not done with signs. One would wish that it would be that cheap. No, it's got to be done with love. And the love is putting in the designs that people want to be in that space, and they want to take their time getting to that space, and they want to park right there. And the interesting thing is, when we start to use the right tools, the regional motors, the motors that doesn't want to go into the downtown, actually gets through that area faster than they do today.
By the way, how important are trees?
Trees are vital to the life of a city. We have underrated them in every possible way. The figure I like to use, and this comes from the U.S. Forest Service, an urban street tree, that is a tree that gets to live near a street, is probably a $300 to $600 investment. Maybe a little more if you really do really good things for the tree. In its lifetime, it will return back to the city $60,000. And that's in energy savings, prolonging the life of asphalt, everything. It has nothing to do with the beauty and the sanctuary for birds and insects and all the things we love to have in a city. But yeah, you can't put in anything that's going to give you a higher rate of return.
So what does it take to revitalize a downtown in terms of the city itself? Some cities have said what they did was they got their people together and they had a vision, or they said we've got to do this and these are our strategies. And it's not just, say, Berlin, but a number of other downtowns have done the same thing. What does it take to get that kind of human capital together to determine that you're going to revitalize a downtown?
Well, Don, you used the right word, human capital. Everybody fusses around, do we have enough financial capital? We've got more financial capital than we need in this country. What we lack is the human capital, what we call social capital, a willingness for people to work together, to become educated, to reach that common ground, to where the retailers realize what's in their best interest rather than just arguing off the hip from things that they were afraid of. So that's the key, to come up with workshops. Charrette is a style of a longer thing than a workshop. It might take a week or so, that brings people together to help design it. But it's the people who are designing it, the retailers, the people who live in the neighborhood, anyone who has a financial stake. They're the designers, aided or assisted by planners, architects, and engineers. We don't let the professionals design our city. We need to design it ourselves. I can give you a great case study.
Go ahead.
A town I had never heard of, Lancaster, California.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty good sized town, about 130,000, I believe, population. Invited me in to start working on a bike plan. And I saw their downtown and my jaw dropped. It was the most beautiful downtown I had ever seen. And I knew that it had formerly been a strip through their downtown, kind of like Route 50 here. And I walked into the city council. They were waiting for me. And my surprise just must have been beaming or something. And they were looking at me a way I've never seen people look at me before. And they said, Dan, you inspired this. You told us we could do this. At a conference 10 years earlier, they were there. And they hired a great architectural team to come in to work with their people to come up with this new street. They've already seen $900 million of new buildings come to their downtown. And that's what it's all about. People working together with some professional assistance, but it's the people that make it work.
How do you get to avoid the what seems to be like the false starts? I mean, because we've had a number of committees and so on, and they've come up with streetscapings and a number of other things, and then they kind of like go for a while, and then it just doesn't take off. I mean, is there a sustainability or approach to getting all these people together to actually move forward? And there's also, too, I might add, there's also stresses and strains in terms of the growth of the city, where some people want things to stay exactly the same, or they're worried about one issue as opposed to another, all because there's been growth. We've seen that tension, too. What about that?
Well, the other commonality I see in all the cities that are making it is finding a leader that's going to stick with it, whether it's an elected leader, a person who's a business leader, or whatever. In Batesville, Arkansas, the person is a retired admiral who just knew about leadership, and he knew how to bring people together, to hold them together, to work with the Chamber of Commerce, the retailers, and so on. And typically when I go into a community, that's all I'm looking for is which person in this audience today is going to emerge as a leader that cannot be stopped. And it's got to happen from internally that way. No outsider can come in and build a city and give you every idea in the world. It doesn't stick. You've got to have a true leader emerge from a workshop like the ones this week or some future effort. But you've got to find that leadership, and that person is going to really turn things around. I just came from East Aurora, New York. Beautiful town, home of the arts and crafts movement. We've totally remanufactured their principal streets, and now they're just charming. It was one woman that took that charge, and she's been with it for about 10 years. She's now leaving. She and her husband found a job in another place altogether, but she made that work, and all it took was those 10 years. And now, of course, you're going to have to search for a new leader.
Right.
But that's what Salisbury's going to have to do, is find who is willing to turn this town into the future.
And how do you get all these disparate elements to work together? I mean, we have tensions over homeowners and landlords and all. I mean, and I'm sure you've seen it all, heard of. I mean, how do you weld those people who have this conflict? An inherent conflict, seemingly.
A good leadership team figures that out. The leader doesn't work alone. They create a team, and that team figures out, oh my gosh, we're arguing over some pretty petty things. Let's find a better way to decide what color our benches are going to be. Right. And by doing that, be able to, one by one, set aside those who are afraid of change, bring them into the process. And you don't bring them all in at once because, you have to find what appeals to each group. But over time, when someone from the community knows why you're changing the way an intersection works and can explain it, it's a lot better than some professional engineer or planner trying to come in and explain the same thing, maybe even using the same words. It's got to be homegrown.
We've been speaking with Dan Burden. He is director and co-founder of the nonprofit Walkable and Livable Communities Institute, and was in town here in Salisbury for a walkable workshop, and we appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us.
Thank you, Don. A pleasure.
This has been Delmarva Today. I'm Don Rush, and thanks for listening.
This has been Delmarva Today, a production of Delmarva Public Radio. Chris Rank produces and is our audio engineer. Don Rush is your host. For podcasts, visit our website, delmarvapublicradio.net, or subscribe to the Delmarva Today podcast in iTunes. Delmarva Today can now be seen on PAC 14. To view the schedule, visit the Daily Times or visit pac14.org.